Have you ever felt like life is one long search for something you can't quite name? A restless, gnawing pull inside you that keeps whispering, there has to be more than this. It doesn't matter how much you achieve, how many places you visit, how many people you meet, or how many goals you cross off your list, that feeling lingers. You chase love, success, enlightenment, pleasure, or wisdom, hoping it will fill the empty space inside, but it never quite does. Why is that? Why do so many people spend their entire lives looking for meaning, only to feel more lost the harder they look? What if the very act of chasing meaning ensures you'll never truly grasp it? There's a strange, ancient paradox hidden within the human condition. Every culture, every philosophy, every religion has in some way addressed it. The more desperately you search for the meaning of life, the more elusive it becomes. Meaning seems to hide from those who seek it most intensely. It taunts you like a mirage in the desert, shimmering in the distance, but always receding when you approach. And yet, the less you chase it, the more life begins to reveal its deeper nature. What if meaning isn't something you find? What if it's something you allow? People often believe that if they can just figure out their purpose or unlock the right philosophy, everything will click into place. They imagine meaning like a treasure chest at the end of a long, exhausting quest, one final, glorious epiphany that will explain their pain, justify their sacrifices, and make their suffering worthwhile. But life, it seems, doesn't work that way. The very pursuit of meaning can become a trap, a prison made of your own expectations. The harder you chase it, the more your mind clings to imagined outcomes. You begin to believe meaning is something out there, separate from your current experience, a missing puzzle piece you have to hunt down. And in doing so, you miss the quiet moments when meaning quietly arrives on its own terms. It's fascinating how often people conflate meaning with external milestones. We believe we'll feel meaningful when we find the right partner, or land the perfect job, or travel the world, or have children, or write a book, or reach enlightenment through some ancient spiritual practice. But even those who accomplish those things often report a peculiar emptiness afterward. Is this it? They wonder. The glow of achievement fades, the applause dies down, the new experience becomes routine, and once again that restless feeling creeps back in. This is the paradox. Meaning arrives when you're no longer obsessed with finding it. When you stop forcing life to explain itself and start participating fully in whatever this is, without trying to label it, control it, or dissect it, meaning begins to bloom in the most unexpected corners. It lives in small moments, the warmth of sunlight on your face, the silence between words, the feeling of your own breath moving in and out. It hides in acts of quiet kindness, in sudden laughter, in awe before something vast you can't name. Meaning can't be captured by the mind because the mind is a tool of measurement, comparison, and prediction. And meaning is not a measurable thing. The human ego despises uncertainty. It craves neat narratives, labels, and answers. Why am I here? What's the point? What's the meaning of this? It demands. Entire industries, religions, and ideologies exist to feed that craving. They offer elaborate answers, systems, and paths that claim to resolve the mystery. And for a while, those answers soothe the ache. But eventually, cracks appear. The world doesn't conform to the neat story you've been sold. People you love die unexpectedly. Dreams fail. New problems arise. Doubts return. And beneath all the theories and belief systems, the great question remains. The ancient mystics knew something modern culture often forgets, that the search for meaning is an internal game, not an external hunt. You don't acquire meaning like a possession. You notice it like a sunrise. It arrives in stillness, not in frantic pursuit. The Taoists called it wu-wei, or effortless action, the art of allowing things to be as they are, without forcing or clinging. The Buddhists spoke of non-attachment, the idea that peace arises not from grasping at life, but from letting go. Stoic philosophers like Marcus Aurelius wrote of accepting the moment as it is, without demanding it justify itself. And yet, in the modern world, we're trained from birth to chase. From the first time someone asks, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" we're conditioned to believe life's value lies in future goals, not in being, but in becoming. The world bombards us with messages that we must achieve, improve, optimize, manifest, and hustle. Social media amplifies this by displaying a constant parade of curated lives, making you feel like you're falling behind in a race you never agreed to run. The result is a culture of perpetual restlessness, where people don't know how to simply exist without assigning every moment a purpose. But here's the secret. The moments that end up mattering most often arrive when you're not trying to make them matter. A chance conversation that changes your perspective forever. A quiet evening where you feel, inexplicably, at peace. An ordinary task that suddenly feels sacred. The most meaningful experiences are not the ones you chase, but the ones you stumble upon while you were busy being fully alive. What if you stopped trying so hard? What if you dropped the exhausting performance of figuring life out and simply allowed yourself to be here, now, fully aware of the mystery, without rushing to explain it? That doesn't mean abandoning ambition or goals. It means no longer clinging to the illusion that those things will finally grant you lasting peace. You can pursue them, but from a place of play, curiosity, and openness, rather than desperation. The paradox is that when you stop chasing meaning and start paying attention to life itself, meaning begins to rise like mist from the landscape of your days. It won't announce itself with a dramatic voiceover or fireworks. It arrives quietly in a look, a word, a pattern of light on the wall. And in those small moments, you realize you were never really lost. You were only searching in the wrong direction. The human mind loves the illusion of control. It wants to believe that with enough effort, it can map the terrain of existence, chart every mystery, and reduce the infinite to a manageable diagram. But reality doesn't work that way. Life is not a problem to be solved. It's an experience to be met. The more you try to pin it down, the more it slips through your fingers like water. And in the space where certainty dies, something beautiful begins. That's where meaning lives. Not in answers, but in presence. Not in control, but in surrender. Not in chasing, but in noticing. And in the simple, quiet realization that you don't need to find meaning because you are meaning, walking, breathing, and unfolding, moment by moment. Consider for a moment the people you admire most, not for their achievements, but for the quality of their presence. Have you ever met someone who seemed content without chasing, someone who radiated a strange, unshakable calm while the rest of the world rushed past them? These people aren't passive or lazy. They simply don't confuse movement with meaning. They've discovered, consciously or not, that chasing after life's answers only makes the questions louder. It's no accident that so many ancient teachers withdrew from society at the height of their worldly success. Siddhartha Gautama, later known as the Buddha, was a prince surrounded by every pleasure imaginable. He had wealth, power, luxury, and the promise of everything a human could want. And yet, something gnawed at him, a sense that all the comforts of the palace couldn't fill the ache he felt inside. So he left it all behind, wandering barefoot through forests and villages, not in search of meaning, but in search of the self beyond the search. In the end, he discovered that meaning arises not from grasping at life, but from releasing your demands upon it. The Greek philosopher Diogenes carried this same spirit of defiance. He lived in a barrel, rejected social conventions, and scorned the frantic race for power and possessions. When Alexander the Great, the most powerful man of his age, approached Diogenes and asked if there was anything he could do for him, Diogenes famously replied, "Yes, stand out of my sunlight." In that one moment, Diogenes revealed a profound truth. The pursuit of external validation and control blinds us to the simple brilliance of what already is. Our culture, however, has conditioned us to fear stillness. Silence feels uncomfortable. Doing nothing feels irresponsible. Not knowing seems weak. And so we fill our schedules, clutter our minds, and distract ourselves with noise in order to avoid sitting alone with the unanswered questions. But those questions are precisely where meaning lies. Not in the answers you collect, but in your willingness to stand inside the uncertainty. It's not that ambition is wrong or that goals are meaningless. Desire is part of being human. But there's a difference between moving through life with intention and becoming a slave to the endless hunger for significance. When your identity becomes tied to what you're chasing, you lose sight of what's right in front of you. The future consumes the present, and the paradox tightens its grip. Many spiritual traditions teach that meaning is less a discovery and more a remembering. You aren't meant to find meaning as if it's buried somewhere far away. You're meant to awaken to the meaning already woven into your experience. The poet Rumi wrote, "Do not seek for love, seek and find all the barriers within yourself that you have built against it." The same could be said for meaning. It's not hidden behind distant mountains or future achievements. It's here, beneath the noise, waiting for you to stop chasing long enough to notice. Modern psychology confirms what mystics have known for centuries. Studies in positive psychology show that people report the greatest sense of meaning not when pursuing pleasure or status, but when fully engaged in simple, immersive activities, creating art, helping others, being in nature, or losing themselves in music or meditation. These are not moments of conquest, but of surrender, of dissolving the boundaries between self and world. In those states of flow, you stop thinking about meaning altogether, and paradoxically, that's when you feel it most. Why does this happen? Because meaning isn't an external object you acquire. It's a state of consciousness. It emerges when your mind stops its compulsive labeling, comparing, and grasping, and instead enters into direct, intimate contact with life. In those moments, you're not thinking about what an experience means. You're experiencing it fully, and in doing so, you realize it doesn't need to mean anything to be beautiful. Its mere existence is enough. You see this in children before the conditioning of adulthood sets in. A child doesn't ask whether a flower's existence justifies itself. They don't demand a reason for a sunset. They simply notice. They marvel. They laugh at water ripples and chase shadows without needing to explain why. They live, not in commentary about life, but in life itself. And while we inevitably grow older, that capacity to be fully present never disappears. It's buried, not destroyed. It can be recovered. This recovery requires courage. It requires a willingness to step outside the culturally sanctioned script that says you must always be climbing, achieving, optimizing, and seeking. It demands that you let go of the fantasy that there's a final answer waiting for you if only you push hard enough. The wisdom traditions have always known this. The Tao Te Ching teaches, those who know do not speak, those who speak do not know. This isn't a rejection of inquiry, but an invitation to deepen it beyond the surface level of concepts. The mind is a brilliant tool, but a terrible master. It wants certainty, but life offers none. The search for meaning through fixed definitions is like trying to nail the ocean to the shore. You may pin down a small piece of it for a moment, but the tide will rise and reclaim it. Better to learn how to float. Better to open yourself to what comes without insisting it conform to your expectations. Consider the idea that meaning is not a destination, but a relationship. It's not something you find and keep, but something you participate in. You co-create it moment by moment through the quality of your attention. The ancient Stoics taught this through the practice of amor fati, the love of one's fate. Not passive resignation, but an active embrace of whatever life brings, knowing that within each experience lies the seed of wisdom. The problem is not that life lacks meaning, but that we expect it to offer us one fixed, permanent answer. Yet everything about existence is fluid. Seasons change, bodies age, friendships fade, ideas evolve. Clinging to one meaning is like clinging to one wave in the ocean. It can't be done. And when you try, you suffer. But if you can release the need for meaning to look a certain way, you create space for something richer to arise. You discover that moments of meaning often arrive disguised as ordinary things. The sound of rain on a roof, the kindness of a stranger, the ache of longing, the silence between words. None of these need to be grand or dramatic to matter. Their power lies in their authenticity, not their scale. We spend so much time seeking meaning as if it were a possession to be acquired, a trophy to display, or a final chapter to be written. But what if meaning is less a noun and more a verb? Not a thing, but an activity. Not something you own, but something you do by the way you pay attention to this strange, beautiful, incomprehensible world. And perhaps that's the real secret, hidden in plain sight. Not that meaning is missing, but that it's everywhere, patiently waiting for you to stop chasing it long enough to see. Modern life is a constant invitation to chase illusions. Everywhere you look, screens flash images of lives better than yours, bodies more perfect, experiences more thrilling. Algorithms whisper promises that with the right purchase, the right course, the right mindset, you too can unlock some hidden key to everlasting satisfaction. It's a lie dressed in bright colors, and most of us know it, yet we chase anyway. Why? Because chasing feels productive. It gives the illusion of control. If you're chasing something, you believe you're moving forward, progressing, closing the distance between yourself and the life you think you're supposed to have. But in reality, much of that movement is circular, a desperate sprint on a treadmill designed to exhaust you without getting you anywhere. It keeps you distracted from the unsettling truth that you were never meant to find some final, permanent meaning written in the sky. And yet, there's a deeper hunger beneath all this surface noise. A longing not for possessions, status, or applause, but for connection to yourself, to others, and to the mystery that surrounds you. Meaning isn't about having the perfect narrative for your existence. It's about feeling, even for a fleeting moment, that you are not separate from the world you inhabit. The tragedy is that in chasing meaning, most people inadvertently create separation. They place meaning on a pedestal as something separate from daily life, imagining it exists only in extraordinary experiences. Climbing mountains, writing bestsellers, achieving fame, or uncovering grand cosmic secrets. But meaning was never meant to be locked away in rare moments. It was meant to be scattered everywhere, like stardust across the ordinary. You can see this in people's regrets. Near the end of life, people rarely mourn the missed promotions, unbought cars, or incomplete checklists. They mourn the conversations they never had, the sunsets they ignored, the moments of laughter they brushed aside while their minds raced towards some imagined future. In the end, it becomes clear that meaning wasn't waiting at the finish line. It was hiding in the spaces you sprinted past. Perhaps the most dangerous illusion is the belief that you'll feel complete when you finally figure it out. The mind loves puzzles. It convinces you that if you could just solve the great riddle of life, then everything would fall into place. But what happens to a puzzle once it's solved? The game is over. The thrill fades. Meaning isn't meant to be a static answer you carry around like a trophy. It's meant to be alive, moving, expanding, and deepening as you grow. Mystics, philosophers, and poets have long hinted at this. Rainer Maria Rilke advised, "Be patient toward all that is unsolved in your heart and try to love the questions themselves." Not to rush to conclusions, but to linger in the beautiful uncertainty of being alive. To treat each question not as a problem demanding a solution, but as a doorway into deeper awareness. Meaning isn't a destination you arrive at after collecting enough wisdom or experience. It's a phenomenon that arises naturally when you are fully immersed in life's unfolding without demanding it prove itself to you. Think of it like watching fireflies at dusk. The moment you run after them, they scatter. But when you sit still, quietly present, they gather around you. This doesn't mean you stop asking questions. On the contrary, it means you ask better ones. Instead of demanding, "What's the meaning of my life?" you might ask, "How can I be fully awake to this moment?" Instead of obsessing over what you lack, you might ask, "What beauty have I overlooked today?" Questions like these don't lead to neat, packaged answers. They lead to experiences. And in those experiences, meaning takes shape. Consider how rivers don't chase their destination. They move naturally, guided by gravity and terrain, carving their path not by force, but by yielding to the shape of the land. And yet, rivers shape mountains, create valleys, sustain forests, and nourish cities. Their meaning lies not in their final arrival at the sea, but in everything they touch along the way. So too with human lives. The meaning isn't waiting at the end. It's hidden in your daily gestures, in the way you listen, in the way you notice small details others ignore, in the way you hold space for someone's sorrow, in the way you forgive yourself in quiet moments. You don't need to announce these things. They don't require an audience. They are sacred precisely because they exist outside the marketplace of performance. And yet, we've been taught to treat life like a performance, to curate ourselves for public approval, to assign value to experiences based on how they'll be perceived, to believe that a moment is only meaningful if it's dramatic, photogenic, or viral. But true meaning often lives in things too subtle for an audience to notice. A shared glance, a wordless understanding, a private vow made to yourself while staring at the ceiling in the middle of the night. One of life's deepest lessons is learning to live without constant applause, to find meaning in things no one will ever praise you for, not because the world demands it, but because something inside you stirs when you move through life this way. It's the difference between chasing a spotlight and becoming a candle in a dark room. One demands attention. The other quietly transforms its surroundings. The paradox of meaning is that it tends to reveal itself not in grand answers, but in small acts of presence. When you're not chasing life's significance like a prize, you're free to actually live it. Free to let mystery remain mystery. Free to marvel at your own brief, miraculous existence without demanding it conform to your expectations. Imagine how differently you might move through the world if you weren't burdened by the constant demand to make every moment significant. If you allowed some experiences to be pointless, some days to be slow, some emotions to be messy, some mysteries to remain unsolved, you might discover that in relinquishing the obsession with meaning, you stumble upon something far more precious: peace. And not the peace of detachment or apathy, but the peace that comes from finally coming home to yourself without needing a reason. The kind of peace that has nothing to prove. The kind that doesn't ask for permission to exist. The kind that arises when you realize that the ache you've been running from isn't a flaw to be fixed, but a doorway to a deeper dimension of being. In many ways, the paradox is this: you spend your life searching for something you already are. You chase meaning like a shadow on the wall, not realizing it's cast by the light inside you. The search itself isn't wrong. But when you learn to stop confusing the map for the territory, the name for the thing, the image for the truth, that's when something shifts. Meaning, you discover, was never outside of you. It was in the way you looked at a stranger, in the taste of water after a long walk, in the aching beauty of a song you don't fully understand, in the quiet certainty that, for reasons you may never explain, it matters that you were here, if only for a while. There's a strange freedom that arrives when you no longer demand that life explain itself to you. When you release the need for everything to have a reason, a pattern, or a higher purpose, you start noticing the extraordinary within the ordinary. The rustle of leaves against a window pane, the flicker of candlelight in a quiet room, the pulse in your wrist reminding you that, against all odds, you are here, breathing, existing, participating in this impossible, beautiful mystery. Meaning is often sold to us as a grand, monumental thing, something earned through suffering or conquest. But what if it isn't grand at all? What if it's subtle? What if it's so woven into the fabric of every passing moment that we only miss it because we expect it to arrive with thunder and applause? The greatest wisdom traditions remind us that presence is its own reward. That to be fully awake to a moment is to step outside the endless loop of craving and resistance, not to escape life's chaos or pain, but to see it clearly, without distortion. To meet it as it is, not as you wish it to be. And in that clear seeing, you find a kind of meaning that needs no explanation. Modern culture loves certainty. We build ideologies, systems, and identities on the illusion that life can be fully known, tamed, and mastered. But the ancients knew better. They understood that to grasp life too tightly is to kill its vitality, that to name a thing too quickly is to miss its essence. The Taoists spoke of the uncarved block, a metaphor for reality in its raw, unconditioned state, before the mind rushes in to label, categorize, and control. They believed that the deepest wisdom lies not in knowing, but in allowing. Meaning, in this view, is not a destination but a dance, not a possession but a relationship. It moves, shifts, vanishes, and reappears. It takes shape in the spaces between words, in the pauses between heartbeats, in the silent agreements between two people who share a glance and understand something too delicate for language. And this is where so many seekers lose their way. They chase meaning as if it were a trophy to display on a shelf. But trophies gather dust. Experiences fade. Even memories distort themselves over time. What remains, long after the noise has died down, are the small, quiet certainties you carried inside you. The times you noticed beauty no one else saw. The times you showed kindness no one recorded. The times you sat in stillness and let the world be what it was, without needing it to justify itself. In those moments, you realize meaning was never missing. It was never hiding. It was simply waiting for you to stop chasing long enough to see it. And when you do, life begins to soften. The sharp edges of expectation wear down. The frantic hunger for answers quiets, and in its place grows a deep, steady pulse, a trust in something larger than your need for control. You don't have to abandon your goals, your dreams, or your questions, but you might hold them a little more lightly. Approach them not as demands upon the universe, but as invitations to participate in the unfolding of something vast and unknowable. You might notice that, often, the most meaningful conversations aren't the ones where you finally explain yourself perfectly, but the ones where you simply sit with another person, side by side, in the mystery. Philosopher Alan Watts once wrote, "The meaning of life is just to be alive." It is so plain and so obvious and so simple. And yet, everybody rushes around in a great panic as if it were necessary to achieve something beyond themselves. There's a quiet liberation in those words, the realization that you don't have to invent meaning for your life. You simply have to live it, to notice it, to receive it like an unexpected gift. And the most beautiful part is that once you stop demanding meaning from life, you become more capable of creating it, not through force, but through presence, through the way you pay attention, through the choices you make when no one is watching, through the way you carry yourself in a world that often forgets to be gentle. You'll begin to see meaning in overlooked places, in the old tree you pass on your way to work, in the familiar pattern of raindrops against glass, in the way your chest rises and falls as you breathe, in the ache of longing, in the warmth of gratitude for no particular reason. These are the brushstrokes of a life rich with meaning, not because it was chased down and captured, but because it was witnessed. And that, perhaps, is the real paradox. That meaning is not something you find. It's something you notice, something you feel, something you participate in by choosing to be awake to the simple, unrepeatable miracle of each ordinary day. So the next time you find yourself caught in the desperate chase for answers, pause. Feel the texture of the air around you. Notice the way light falls against the wall. Listen to the quiet sound beneath the noise. Remember that you're not here to figure it all out. You're here to experience it, to be moved by it, to contribute your small, irreplaceable thread to the vast, tangled tapestry of human experience. And maybe, just maybe, you'll realize you were never chasing meaning. You were chasing permission to rest in what you already are. Now I'd love to hear from you. What's one ordinary, quiet moment in your life that felt unexpectedly meaningful? A detail you noticed, a conversation you remember, a silence that spoke louder than words. Share it in the comments below. Your story might be the reminder someone else needs today.